Welcome to the Ministry Mindset Podcast. The Ministry Mindset Podcast is designed to help people discover their God-given purpose and to learn to put that purpose into action. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Ministry Mindset. We're glad to have you all here. Today, we've got a great message planned. We actually have a panel. We're going to talk a little bit with some of our first cohort who've gone through the Ministry Mindset and kind of get an idea of some of the things that they've learned, some of the changes that have happened in their lives. And it's real important to be able to see an opportunity for how this really plays out with real people. We've been talking for weeks now about each of the phases of the Ministry Mindset. And we just wanted to bring you an opportunity to hear from some of the folks that have actually gone through the program and talk about how God is changing their lives by helping them put their purpose into action. So I just want to welcome everybody. Tony Smith is back with me.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to have you, Tony.
Good to be here.
We also have Pete Kennedy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good for you to be here. And Kevin Strickland, who stepped away for a second, but he'll be right back. And we have John Brandt.
Hi, Tom. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you here, John. All right. So the way this is going to work is, I want to just have a conversation about how this program has had an impact in each one of your lives. Clearly, when I say Ministry Mindset, for me, I get all excited and giddy about it because I know the work that it is and it's dear to my heart. But, clearly, I like to be objective. So it's good to have objectivity. And so that's why we have our panel here. So most of you know Tony Smith already. So we're going to start with Pete and John. But I want can each one of you share just what you do in the world, what your job is, kind of how you got here, and what motivated you to get involved in this program? So why don't you go ahead and start, Pete?
All right. Just for reference, I'm 66 years old. And 5 years ago, I was saved. And that weekend, I also signed up to volunteer to be an usher. And I was baptized just a few weeks later. So I'm very new to this new world. Outside of my faith in church, I've been in retail all my life and dealt with folks all different economic levels and educational levels. When I'm at church, those differences disappear. It's just people. That one-on-one interaction is so rewarding for me. Wow. I'm so glad to be here as part of this panel. Look forward to what the next chapter will bring.
That's great. So, John, tell us a little bit about what you do and why did you join the Ministry Mindset Project?
Well, I'm recently retired. I retired about 4 months ago from a second career. My first career, I spent about 25 years in the military. The second career was about 20 years working as a human resource manager in nonprofit organizations. One of the reasons that I joined the Ministry Mindset was to get some focus and figure out what life is going to look like in retirement.
And how about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm an environmental health and safety coordinator for Meta, formerly Facebook. I've been in that profession probably about 30 years. Wow. For various companies. That's what I've always done. In terms of what I want to get out of this is just to help people. Something I've always done my entire life. That started out going to church. Yeah. And being told to go to church, and in church learned about helping other people, and that someday you might need help yourself. So I've always volunteered for various organizations, everything from the Salvation Army to homeless shelters. I did a Big Brother project one time. Like John said, I'm not yet retired, but my plan is to retire this year, God willing. And at that time, one of the things I do want to do is more volunteer work.
Well, I just got to say, it's really amazing to have you all here because the way this cohort kind of got started has its own interesting story to it. Kevin kind of has some responsibility in that. One Sunday morning, we were at church, and Tony and I, as we were getting the Ministry Mindset program started, we started praying for who, God might help us to be able to reach and to minister to. And Kevin's a guy that used to sit behind me and still does kind of sit behind me every Sunday morning in church. And Kevin was real involved on the host team, and was one of those guys that I didn't know his name probably for, I don't know, months before, but we would.
Nor are yours.
Right. But we would say hi every morning and chat. Once I got the book written, I talked to Tony and I said, God's really laying this guy on my heart. We should give him one of these books and just see he'd be interested in maybe being a part of this. And so Tony actually took a copy of the book and gave it to Kevin one morning. And Kevin went back and started reading it. And I like the way you tell the story, Kevin, when you come back to church, because you didn't even know that I.
No, I did not. When I was reading the book, I went back. They have the About the Author section on every book, and I saw your picture, and I said, I think that's the guy that sits in front of me at church. And I know that, and Tony was always, a lot of times sitting with him and his wife. So I thought, wow, that is him, And so then I knew who it was. I knew your name, and it was just very, eye-opening that, I knew somebody that would write such a good book. It had a great impression on me. Mm-hmm. Your book did. I guess God put it on my heart to say, Kevin, go on Amazon and buy some copies. Hand them out. That's what I did. I went on Amazon. I ordered 10 copies, and they came in. I just, at random, handed them out to different people, men in the church. I gave it to them and then asked them to give me feedback if they liked it, to finish it off, and whether or not they wanted to be, to move further on. And some didn't, some did, but, that's the way it always is. And at least they got the book and, they can get the value out of it if they take time to read it.
Right.
So that's how it happened. And I'm really, really happy, that I did that. I've gotten to be really good friends with some of the people here, Yeah, you see them at church, you see a lot of people at church and you say, hi, how you doing? And, I love you, and you hug them and all that. But it's just a little different. There's a bond here that has developed. So that's great value to me. And, that money was well spent on those 10 books.
Well, and what's great, too, is two of the other guys in this cohort right now were two guys that you gave a book to.
Yep. And just one thing, some of the people that couldn't come, they had really good reasons to. But, some of them just work out of town a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they have family commitments. So, I understood everyone, why they couldn't. I'm just glad they got the book.
Well, and I think some of those other folks want to be in another cohort, so couldn't be in this one.
Absolutely.
So that's great. All right, so I'd like to ask you, each of you, a question related to some of the training we've had, because we've had, going through the Kazone experience, the personality test and training, the spiritual gifts training we did, Clifton Strengths Finder training, and then, of course, the ministry canvas. Every single training we did, there were these moments of epiphanies and aha moments that kind of sprung up for everybody. So starting with the Kazone experience, my first question for you all is, what was the most impactful part of the Kazone experience training for you? And whoever wants to take it first.
I've been through Kazone, I think 3 times now.
Wow.
And every time I'm able to refine my purpose statement a little more and a little more and a little more. And this time I think I finally nailed it down, and it's something that I can use in retirement.
That's awesome, John. How about you, Kevin?
As I look back on it here, I would say that the biggest thing I got out of Kazone was when you see a problem and you come up with a solution, if you don't do it with some kind of process, if you will, or steps, you really are not ended up with the solution that you think you did. And that's one thing I got out of this was, that, yeah, I want to help people. I want to help people do this. I want to help people do that. But there's a lot of steps that goes into that. You have to really, really dissect it and process it. And knowing, being the person who you are from the Kazone experience, then you just, then you know that, hey, I look back on the solutions I thought that could have been, and when I look at some of the things that I got out of Kazone, it's 2 totally different things. Nice. And it's much more detailed. So if there's one thing I learned, the main thing I learned out of that, I guess that would be it.
Great. How about you, Pete? What stood out for you?
I think it's the first time that I actually wrote down what my purpose is.
Wow.
I'd never put that all together. In the retail world, there's business purposes. In the spiritual world, I never realized that I've got a purpose. And to put it down into words, as I'm reviewing this right now, it's amazing that my purpose statement for that I wrote, it's almost exactly the same as a mission statement, a purpose statement that I wrote about a week ago, but I hadn't remembered that I had written this down.
Wow.
As I'm looking back at this, what we're really focusing on is who we are, what we consider most important in life, and important people and ideas. And some of those really surprised me.
Nice. So we also did the personality test, where we did a revised version of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And for those of you who've listened to that podcast episode and have been to our website, ministry-mindset.org, we have, training available there, but we actually go through a revised version of the Myers-Briggs type indicator called the Paragon Learning Styles Inventory. And the second thing we take everybody through in the program is that personality evaluation. And it's always interesting what happens, when we start to think about our spiritual gifts and our purpose, and we kind of start developing a statement that kind of focuses around our spiritual purpose and passion, to then take a look at, okay, what's my personality type? What are these 4 letters mean, and how does that impact my behavior? So what was one of the most surprising things you learned when we took the personality test and you kind of got to see, your label? For those of you who don't know, I am an ENFJ, or a teacher personality type. And I remember when I first learned my personality type, it was a significant surprise and epiphany for me, because it very much explained who I am and why I do a lot of the things that I do. And I wish I'd have known that 25 or 30 years ago, because it would have saved me a whole lot of headaches. So how about you, John? What was one of the things that surprised you?
I had taken the Myers-Briggs quite a bit earlier in my career. I've taken it a couple of different times. And interestingly enough, the score has never changed. I've always been an INTJ. I don't know, I've been described in the past as having a kind of a quiet leadership style, but effective. And I think it really speaks to that score. One of the things I was most impressed with was how each of these different assessments really mesh with each other, with Strength Finder and with the Spiritual Gifts Test.
Right. Pete, how about you? I remember your 4 letters.
I've got my cheat sheet right here.
That's awesome.
Yeah. INFJ, which talks about my personality being an introvert as opposed to extrovert. Although you would think in retail, I'd be an extrovert. So much for that. And I'm still learning more about these personality traits. My coach, Tony, has the same 4 letters. And so I'm trying to pick up a little bit more of what makes us more similar than different.
Right. How about you, Kevin? What stood out for you?
Yeah, mine came out to be an I/ESFJ.
Nice.
Which was surprising to me. I definitely consider myself an extrovert, and I still do. I'm not doubting the results of the test. There may be other instances or situations where I'm more of an introvert, so that came out. So that was a little surprising. Now the S portion, which is, intuitive, sensate, that's definitely me. No doubt about that. Thinker, a feeler. F, yeah, I think so too. J, judger, perceiver. Perceiver, I'll agree with, but I have tested this in myself, and really it is pretty accurate, that portion of it. So that part of it was, the last part was more surprising than anything else, but it definitely nailed who I am. There's no doubt about it.
Nice.
So yeah, and I've taken these before. I wish I was like John. It's been so many years. We had them at work before we went through this model. It would have been interesting just to see if it was any different than what it is now.
Yeah, it's kind of cool when you kind of actually get to see, wow, so that's why I don't hang my clothes up, or why, I categorize my short sleeves and long sleeves and my colors, or why I don't make my bed in the morning, or why I can't function in the morning unless I make my bed. I know we laugh about those kind of things, but those behaviors come from some of the personality traits that we have. And it's funny for those of you listening out there to the podcast, two of the panelists right now are introverts. And when they walked in and saw the microphones around the table tonight, they almost decided to walk out and go back to their car. So, all right. So after we got done with personalities, we went to the Clifton StrengthsFinder 2.0 assessment. So the strengths are based on that natural talent or those abilities that we have that kind of form those things that we excel at or do really, really well. And part of the philosophy of the StrengthsFinder is helping people to recognize where they're strong and then invest in those strengths as opposed to spending time trying to build up or repair or remediate those areas where we might be weak. We will be much more effective when we invest in our strengths versus when we spend our time trying to remediate our weaknesses. So when we did that assessment with all of you, what were some of the kind of surprises that really stood out when you went through it? Why don't you start, Pete?
What stood out first was my top 5 characteristics or strengths. As I'm discovering all this, wow, I use every one of them in my retail world.
Wow.
I consider myself relatively successful in retail, and now I know why. Because these strengths really help to make me a good leader. And then I started thinking about how I can use that in the next chapter of my life, where I discover my strengths and my purpose. Just to give you an idea, my number 1 strength is context. I enjoy trying to understand where people come from, where they're going, what their perspective is. Individualization, big word for me. The uniqueness of people. Wow. Isn't that true? Everybody that you meet is so totally unique and adds value. Strategic. I love thinking of different ways to conquer a problem. There's always something that can make it easier, and to be the one that creates that, I enjoy it. Arranger, I'm a conductor, so I've got my wand, and I help the musicians get in line and really perform. And introspective, appreciate the intellectual discussions. I love hearing what people think and why they think it. And if I can take all of these strengths and now translate it into my purpose, watch out, world, here I come.
Wow. That's really powerful. And it's really great when, we go through and we look at all these, and then suddenly we get the opportunity to actually think about, how does this translate into the context of what I do every day? One of the things we talk a lot about in the Ministry Mindset program that I think is a little different than other types of training that focus on helping people that want to be doing ministry is we don't just look at ministry as another profession. I wrote about this in the book, where I spent many, many years wondering, when am I going to go back to seminary? When's that big opportunity going to come when I'm going to finally be hired to be in professional ministry? But ministry does not really become real until we start living the calling that God's placed in our lives to lead people to become fully devoted followers of Christ in our everyday lives, the jobs that we have right where we are. And so as you're talking about going to work and seeing, oh my gosh, this is who I am, and this is how I'm working at work. How has it made you more intentional at work, Pete?
Well, the fact that I now understand why I do the things that I do, that it's just part of my nature, but it's that undescribable part of me that I didn't really recognize. I just went through life every day doing what I do. Now I understand why I do it, and I am so excited to now take this in my new purpose in life.
That's awesome. How about you, John? Something stand out for you with the StrengthsFinder?
Well, like Pete said, I recognized right off those were the things that made me successful in both of my careers. the strengths that I have. I actually took Strength Finder a few years ago as well, along with the Myers-Briggs, and it's such a valuable tool. I ended up using it in my last job. I took our leadership team through the Strength Finder assessment, and the difference it made in our organization was just unbelievable. It really helped us to put together more effective teams.
Let's talk a little bit about the fourth piece or component, which is the ministry canvas. So the ministry canvas is really a template that we designed to kind of take an entrepreneurial approach to finding a way to solve a problem. And Kevin kind of alluded to that magic a little earlier in the conversation, and I'm going to go to you in a minute, Kevin, to talk about that. But there's 9 boxes on the ministry canvas that walk through a problem recognition, discovery, validation, solution, validation, and then testing and implementation phase, if you will. And it's very similar to, for those of you who ever have studied the lean canvas model or lean management or the business, building a business model, it's very similar in that approach. And so what we do is when we look at who we are, we look at our strengths, we look at our kazone, we look at our spiritual gifts, we look at our personality, and we see how all those overlap, and we start to kind of clarify, well, what is my purpose? And what are my passions? What am I excited about in reference to God's kingdom? Where do I work? What do I do? How's all that connected and related? This gives us the opportunity to hone in on really identifying a problem that we want to solve. And that problem becomes then theoretically kind of our ministry, right? So I wanted you to talk a little bit again, Kevin, when we went through the Canvas training and you were going through those 9 boxes, what was the takeaway for you? What stood out?
Basically, what I got out of it is, if let's say I want to help somebody, right? I want to help somebody. I want to help the homeless, just to say that, just as an example. Before I had these tools, before I learned these things about myself, it'd be, that's easy. I'll just, drop down the homeless shelter a couple times a week and, help serve food, whatever, right? And maybe to, talk a little bit to people. But this made me think a lot deeper than that. Is that really, if they're in a cycle of poverty, for instance, and they have children coming up and maybe their generations have been, in a cycle of poverty, is that really a solution to their problem? And the answer is no. Yeah, of course, food is important, right? We all have to, eat, drink. But if we're going to break that cycle of poverty, there are other things that, you have to expand out on what you want to do. And especially for maybe the next generation coming up, so, you teach them skills, you try to give them advice on what they should do to have a stable profession in life. You educate them. Right. I've helped with, math. I'm real good at that. So I did schooling, things like that. Give them the tools necessary, try to lead them in the right direction so they can be successful in life and maybe break that cycle of poverty. So I guess that's the thing I got of it most. It was just a simple solution right away. Okay, I got a problem here. Okay, boom, let's go do this.
Right.
But it's not like that at all. And it's not even like what I told you about, getting them more educated and teaching them skills. It's just, this is going to make me, I think I expanded more by learning this, but I know there's so many more things that I can do to, help make these people successful. Yeah. Because I'm really going to take the time to think about it.
And what you're hitting on there, Kevin, is this idea that, we see problems all the time. And when we're in the church and we're trying to serve, everywhere you turn in church, there's a problem. Somebody's got a problem, right? Yeah. Whether it is someone who's homeless or somebody needs, groceries, or there's, someone who needs their grass mowed, or there's someone who's depressed, or there's someone who's, struggling with an addiction. And one thing about Western culture is we are really good at what I call, quick, shotgun solutions. And you're like, oh, you got a problem? Oh, I'll fix it. Those of us who have resources, we can throw cash at something. We can go buy, we can fix something right away. What the ministry canvas does, and I love that is the thing that really popped out to you is the ministry canvas focuses you to say, okay, what is the problem? And then I have to ask the question, who's the audience that has the problem? And is this really a problem or a symptom of a bigger problem? And it's like, before I go to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do to fix it, I've got to answer 8 other questions. And I've got to validate that this problem really is a problem and understand the problem. Because, this is one of the reasons why we have so many, and John can speak to this too. We have so many nonprofits out there nowadays doing things, and there are a lot of nonprofits out there doing things that the one thing they're really good at is not solving problems, but raising money, right? And what they should be good at is solving problems. So, John, you talk a little bit about your experience with the Canvas.
And the Canvas is a fantastic tool to use to try and solve some of those problems, because it does take you through a process of getting a good identification of what the problem is, who the audience is, and what value we provide, or whether we have any value at all to provide.
Right.
And if we don't, do we know somebody that maybe can?
That's great. That's great.
A lot of times we want to jump right to implementing without determining what a good solution might be,
right,
and what the cost of that is, what activities are going to be, do you need to come up with, what resources do you need? Again, for nonprofits, obtaining resources is very difficult. A lot of times the money they raise is going to keep the lights on and the water bill paid.
Right.
They don't have a lot of resources for a lot of nonprofits don't have resources for real large scale solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of forces you to look at all that before you even start implementing it. Your chances of being successful by using the ministry canvas, I think, are a lot greater than if you didn't use it.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, and just one thing you made me think about, John, was, the value we provide, as part of the ministry canvas. I talked about, teaching them math and, giving them food, telling them what's a good career, what's a good stable career. That is about self-worth. That's what's being provided, trying to give them a sense of self-worth. It's not the education itself. It's not teaching them algebra or geometry or anything else. It's, raising how they feel about themselves. So the real thing you're providing is giving them a sense of self-worth.
Yeah, and what, for those of you listening, what Kevin is talking about is one of the boxes on the ministry canvas asks, what is the value that we can provide? And what's important about that is the value that we provide is not what is the activity or the thing we're going to do. We're not going to open a women's shelter. We're not going to, create a food pantry. Those are activities, things we do, right? Value we provide is just that. What, based on my skills, my strengths, my talents, my personality, all this stuff that we have magically, accidentally been talking about up to this point, right? What value can I provide to somebody in my service? And if it's self-esteem, if it's self-worth, if it's affirmation, if it's support, if, the value that we provide is what determines what activities we end up ultimately doing, right? Because in a homeless ministry, there are 1,000 different ways to solve a problem. But if the outcome we've determined is really to solve the bigger problem and not just the immediate problem, we have to understand what value we provide. Because if we serve in any area and we don't work in an area where our value is being communicated and making a difference, we will burn out and we will lose motivation and we will experience a failure in a way that doesn't challenge or build us up. And that happens a lot. For those of you who've been in volunteer ministry before and you dread going to church anymore because you just are burned out, that is a problem. We don't want that. We're not teaching that in the ministry mindset. So how about for you, Pete? When you looked at the canvas for the first time, what's some of the things that stood out for you?
What can I possibly add to what the three of you have said so far? My perspective is a little bit different as I was reflecting. The first thing that came to mind was, at work, I am, for all intents and purposes, the CEO of my business. I identify the problem, I identify solutions, what are the consequences, and I go through all these steps. At home, When my wife lets me, I'm the CEO at home. And when we have a problem, we identify what the problem is. We think of different solutions and what are the possible consequences of those solutions. In the ministry mindset, if I don't invest that same type of thought process, I'm doomed to be ineffective. By having that big world outlook and consider all the different variables, if I don't do that effectively, I will not be as effective as I could be.
Wow. So the three of you have been through a lot. We've talked about a lot of things. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 4 months, and you're not done, right? I mean, we still have some more work to do, and each of you are developing, your canvas with a coach, and we're coaching through this process. That's kind of the long-term phase is being able to come alongside and really kind of support each of you in finding that ministry, whatever that is, right? That problem that we want to solve, and then being supportive and helping, to see those small little milestones accomplished in the way that we reach out. Because we know when we successfully identify a problem that needs to be solved, we understand our value, we understand all of who we are so that we can best be positioned in the place we need to be in order to make an impact. Our success rate goes way up. And how do I know this? Is because I've been an entrepreneur and entrepreneurial coach for a long time, and this applies in the secular world. And that I'm not saying that we're applying secular wisdom to spiritual things. Entrepreneurial thinking very much, in my opinion, is probably more biblical than it is anything else. But we are understanding what the wisdom of God looks like in our lives as men and women, as we begin to understand how God has called us. Because God has called all of us. God may not have called you all to be pastors or evangelists or professional teachers, but even a man who's leading at a furniture store selling furniture has a mission field and a ministry and people that need to know Jesus right there. And I can attest that, we're seeing fruit of that happen in at your work right now, Pete, right? Absolutely. And that's what this is all about. So as we wrap up this episode, if there's one thing that you'd like to tell anybody listening to this podcast about the ministry mindset, what would it be? Let's start with you, Kevin.
It's really easy for me. If you want to really find out who you are, how you can be most effective with whatever you do, whether it be at home, whether it be at work, whatever it be, I would strongly urge you to go through this process. You may think you know who you are and you're going to be right about some things, but there's going to be some things that are going to surprise you. And those are the things, if you start to work on those, it will make you a better person, stronger, more effective person in your family and in your professional life.
How about you, John?
I wish I would have had this 30 years ago. I've done a lot of different leadership and management classes, assessments. I've done things through the church. I've done things through my employer. This is probably, well, not probably, it is the most complete package of spiritual and mental development that I've ever been a part of. Wow. You learn so much about yourself. What makes you effective, what things that maybe you need to work on a bit, and what's going to make you successful not only in your personal life, but in your spiritual life as well.
Wow. And how about you, Pete?
Well, I'm not that great at speaking off the cuff, and I thought that maybe I should write down my thoughts. So here we go in 60 seconds or less. The ministry mindset, for me, is a roadmap. It's a cookbook. It's a how-to manual. After committing my life to Jesus, I wasn't sure what to do next. I started reading my teaching Bible, I got baptized, and I began serving as an usher at my church. But I still felt like I was missing something big. I needed a roadmap. I needed a cookbook. I needed a how-to manual. I needed to understand my strengths and my purpose. I was introduced to Tom by Kevin. Kevin, I was the recipient of one of those books that Kevin had given out. And I opened it up, and slowly I discovered that this was the piece that was missing, that I really needed. I've discovered that it is an amazing blessing to be able to be a blessing to others. I discovered that my God-given purpose is a lifelong journey, not a destination. I read a couple times Tom Darling's purpose statement, and his purpose statement is to empower people to take meaningful action in their personal, professional, and spiritual lives. And so as I read that, I thought, okay, that covers his spiritual life, his professional life, his home life. And Tom has challenged me to write my own purpose statement, and it's still work in progress, but I feel very strongly about this, that my purpose is to encourage persons within my sphere of influence to recognize their God-given strengths, to embrace those strengths, and to encourage them to live out their purpose in the name of God. And I want to thank you, Tom.
Wow. That's amazing.
Excellent, I shall say.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I just want to say that, and I don't know if you all can hear that out there for those of you who are listening to this podcast, but this is what happens when you take the opportunity to learn and go deep and recognize there's no magic in this. And serving Christ is not about a pinnacle that we reach, a place of high level maturity where we graduate in our faith. Somebody who just accepted Christ yesterday can have just as much of an impact in other people's lives than somebody who's been a Christian for 30 years. The point is, God, use me. Here I am. Send me. Use me. Help me to be able to make a difference in other people's lives. And I just want to thank each one of you gentlemen for being on the podcast this week and for sharing, taking a moment to share with each of us what you've learned as part of this process and how these things have, kind of made a difference in your walk, and being able to encourage others that are also trying to figure out how can I simplify and uncomplicate what it means to serve Christ and to be able to put my purpose into action. And if you don't know what your purpose is yet, that's exciting. I know it's not exciting for you, but it's exciting for us because we can help you. We can help you. We have all of this training put together in a way that you can go through the Ministry Mindset program. Now, the three gentlemen that are here with us today have gone through this program face-to-face in real time, and we do that. We also do that online with individuals, and we also have all of this content digitally so that for those folks that want to be able to go through this and start going through it on their own in the middle of their busy schedules, can start to do that. And then we actually provide live coaching to come alongside of all those folks. So you can visit our website at www.ministry-mindset.org. And there's a lot of information there, and there's links to all of how to get started. Also, we have a video on that website that kind of talks about what the program is. You can log on and listen to the rest of our podcast. If you stumbled upon this podcast, we have lots of episodes that go through and talk about the ministry mindset. And we also talk with people that are doing creative things out there, just normal people in the church, walking in Christ, doing simple, normal things to make a difference in other people's lives. For those of you who don't have a copy of the Ministry Mindset, the book, I highly recommend that you go and get that. It's available on Amazon.com in print or in digital form. It comes primed, so you'll get it in 2 days. And that's really the starting point, is reading that book. I talk a lot about my journey in there, but we talk about how all these pieces kind of fit together. And that is what kind of kicks off this process. And, this is one of those stories we're going to be telling for a long time, Kevin. Someone read the book, got inspired, and got inspired and went out and bought 10 copies and just gave them away. And now we have, people that are out there looking how to serve God as a result of a very simple and small form of ministry, which is what you did too, Kevin.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, and so am I.
And so am I. Thank you.
Yes, we are.
You're very welcome.
So I just want to thank all of you for being here. Tony, I want to thank you for being here. Tony's been sitting there quietly, kind of watching from the back. Tony and I have been on this journey, working on this from the very beginning. So anything you want to say as we leave, Tony?
You guys impress me. It's amazing when you think about all the work that we've done. And sometimes Tom and I are looking at each other and we get frustrated because we don't really know what's really going on behind the scene. And then when we get you guys here, start talking about this, all of a sudden the reality is, oh my God, God is working in this ministry. People are really, their lives are changing, and it gives me just absolute joy. And I'm humbled, and it's just great just to be part of this ministry.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us this week. We will be back in a couple weeks for the next podcast episode, and we'll see you again on the Ministry Mindset.